Hey guys, and welcome back to Sonic and the Black Knight. We're going to be slashing and speeding our way through 2 levels in this one. Don't we just spoil you guys. First up is Camelot Castle, and then we're going to be moving on to the Deep Woods. We're going to reach the blacksmith's shop here, and I will say, one thing I've always liked about the storybook games is like the way you progress through the narrative by actually going through the level and whatnot. Like you start at point A, and point B is where the following cutscene will take place, essentially. So while it might be very limited in terms of gameplay, the narrative does find a few like cheeky workarounds to keep it coherent. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, what I like in particular about this, comparing it to Secret Rings, is that although there are optional missions along the way, which we'll see over time, we haven't got any yet, but it does still kind of guide you in the right direction, compared to Secret Rings, where it is literally just a crapshoot as to whether you pick in the next relevant mission or not half the time. So, like, in that way, yeah, it's like, you know, we're going to the blacksmith, then once we're there, it will play the cutscene, and it will sort of nudge us to go into the next story mission. So, it's a lot clearer in that respect. And I do also want to bring up how fucking pretty this particular level looks to me. Like, I love the coloration here.
Well, I am using a YouTube download here, and I can see more pixels than Sonic has collected rings in his life, so I'll just take your word for it, but it was a good looking game for the time. I feel it would benefit from a HD remaster, honestly, because the art direction for the game is spot on. If there's one thing Sonic Team can occasionally do right, it's aesthetics and sound design, you know?
If there's one thing that I think this game does really well from this particular era, like taking Unleashed out of the question just because it was such a higher budget game and they had the HD consoles to fuck around with, but in terms of this, I like that the colour is a lot more muted. It's Sonic traditionally, since moving into 3D, like, and it got really bad with Heroes and certain parts of Shadow, it's always been kind of oversaturated, whereas they really turned it down here, and I honestly think it works a lot better in that respect.
I feel it works better considering the tone and what they were going for with the Arthurian lore and whatnot. It was a lot more vibrant, you know, in Secret Rings, which again fit the tone of that game. But in this scene particularly, obviously we have, you know, characters from the Sonic mythos standing in for characters of Arthurian lore. I don't think there was like a blacksmith who worked on like Excalibur in said lore, but what do I know? I haven't boned up on my books and whatnot in the past, how old am I? Carry the 2. 30 or so years, so who knows, but I do love like the fucking Renaissance version of I Wanna Fly High. It's beautiful, so it is.
I know!
It is, and I will say, like, I know next to nothing about the actual story itself, so I imagine over the course of the story Richie will be filling in the blanks for me, but I will take a guess, just wager some money on it, that if there was a blacksmith who worked on Caliburn, he probably wasn't a two-tailed fox.
Yes. Well, I mean, actually, you know, since, you know, you're bringing up the actual story of Arthur, I feel this is a good time, apart from the fact that, you know, we're just getting the Soul Surge and figuring out how to use that, like, for the love of God. Either way, I mean, this is a cool mechanic, it's really awesome, getting the perfect hits on the thing is glorious.
It feels good, yeah.
It's great. So, King Arthur, obviously, if you weren't aware, is a legendary king of Britain that, well, who according to medieval histories and romances, led the defence of Britain against Saxon invaders in the late 5th and early 6th centuries. Basically, there's a period of English history where we don't have any actual information, really, or any concrete information on who actually ran the country.
So Sonic could be there for all we know. There's no way you can prove he wasn't.
I mean, exactly. So there were sort of sparse bits of information. There's the Annales Cambriae and the Historia Britonum, and the writings of a guy called Gildas, where sort of Arthur's name turns up, but there's nothing really that anybody has concrete. The real origin of the legend of King Arthur is Geoffrey of Monmouth's 12th century History of the Kings of Britain, which basically creates the Arthur myth that we know today.
Okay.
Because it brings in Arthur's father being Uther Pendragon, it brings in the magician Merlin, Arthur's wife Guinevere, the sword Excalibur, Arthur's conception at Tintagel. his final battle against Mordred at Camelot, and his final rest in Avalon. So, kind of the key bits of the Arthur story originated with Geoffrey of Monmouth's narrative, and it was seen as actual history for a while, until they were just like, no, this is just storytelling, and kind of ignored it.
Yeah, we thought it were real, then we realised, oh hey, some guy just pulled this out his arse, cool.
Well, I mean, you know, they saw, like, Jet the Hawk, or whatever the fuck he's named as, and they were like, maybe we should just omit that from the history books.
I know.
Jet the Hawk is one of the playable characters in the multiplayer, which I have never touched. He's playing the role of one of the characters as well, and I think Silver's in there as well, but I also can't remember what he does.
And if I recall correctly, I think Jet is Silver's son, or one of the characters is somebody else's son in terms of which knight they are, which is slightly terrifying when you think about it.
I didn't know we were on Fire Affinity already.
Oh, Lord almighty.
Obviously, you have Geoffrey of Monmouth in terms of the history, but following Geoffrey, you had various other Arthur narratives that took what Geoffrey of Monmouth did and added bits to the lore. So you had Wace's Brute, which I think added in the Round Table. You have Lackerman's Brute, which I think added in some of the more fantastical bits. You had Chrétien de Troyes' romances, and he basically introduced Lancelot to the story of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table.
Okay.
Gawain was already in there, but you've also got a really cool thing because in France, most of the Arthurian romances were around Lancelot. In the UK and England, most of them were around Gawain. So there's a massive split in which knight was the most popular, but Gawain was the most popular in Britain, which is quite fun.
Good stuff. Alright, here's the information on Jet and Silver in Sonic and the Black Knight. Let's see. Jet is Sir Lamorak. And let's have a look down here. In the Arthurian legends, Lamorak was known for his strength and fiery temper. It is possible that Lamorak's temper and Jet's cockiness is what led to Jet taking the role of Lamorak. And Silver is Galahad.
Oh, yes.
Let's see. According to the Arthurian legends, Galahad is the son of Sir Lancelot. So Silver is Shadow's son, essentially. And I can see that happening. Especially since, you know, Rouge has white hair and Silver is...
Oh.
See, like, I'm not surprised that came up, I'm just surprised that it wasn't me who brought it up.
I'm just saying, man, I know my Sonic lore, okay? Richie may be the educated one, but I'm educated in the ways that matter when it comes to Sonic playthroughs.
Yeah, but can hedgehogs even breed with bats? I don't think that works.
Well...
Come on, Tom, you brought it up. Tom's got to answer this one, he brought it up.
Oh look, there's the goal, and we're actually in Deep Woods now, which is not my favourite level in the game. I actually prefer the Woods level we'll get later on, because I prefer the colour palette there. But to answer your question, Flamin, to stop dodging like a little bitch, I don't know, I fucking talk over video games for a living, I'm not a geneticist.
Okay.
Yeah, also, I would like to bring up the fact of we don't know how sexual reproduction occurs in the Sonic universe from a scientific perspective, so God only knows. But moving away from that, just to finish off my Arthurian history,
Please.
Basically the version that we have today is mostly based on Thomas Mallory's 15th century Le Morte d'Arthur, which sort of pulled together all of the romances and all of the different strains of the Arthur narrative and put it into one place. And that's basically what we mostly use today. And also, hey, it's Lancelot, otherwise known as Shadow the Hedgehog.
It was nice to have, like, Shadow back in this game, and I think they picked a good, like, antagonistic character for him to play here.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, they did. I will say I'm not that fond on these character battles. They can be a little bit fiddly. They're the kind of battles that you either win instantly with no effort, or you get in a lock. There's kind of no middle ground, I've found.
This is the weakest part of the gameplay in Sonic and the Black Knight, with the clashes and whatnot. I swear, I will take the L if it's me doing something wrong, but what it displays on screen and what it's expecting from me are very clearly two different things, and I always wind up on, like, the losing end of a clash when it comes to this sort of fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, my strategy there was just restart the level about 60 odd times until I got a run where he didn't do the clash thing. Which is a scrub technique, but fuck it worked.
Now, there is an expert level version of this fight. Will we be seeing Lancelot returns later in the game?
Yes, we will, and that's partially because a good couple of people did ask for that, and I believe Goldstorm also threatened not to invite me to his birthday party if I didn't, so there we go.
Oh, okay, well...
Also, to be fair, I would be judging you really hard because, if I recall correctly, I hope I recall correctly, I definitely did Lancelot Returns in my Black Knight playthrough, so I would have been judging you just so hard if you didn't.
I attempted to do it, I'm pretty sure, but damn, nice rank there, mate. But it was just too beyond me at the time. I was too young, too inexperienced.
Weren't you like the same age then that I am now, though?
It's neither here nor there, Flame, honestly. You know, you bring up these things and it's like, what the hell?
Guess I'm just more mature, that's how it works, right?
Calibird walking along, .gif. I love this.
Yeah.
I fucking love that. Like, just imagine you've got a tiny pair of legs just under the screen, just carrying him along. That's how I see this.
God, like a fucking Adventure Time character or something. Sonic's characterization in this game is amazing, by the way. I know it's like, hey, look at these cartoon animals, why do you care how they're characterized and whatnot? But I like to give credit where credit is due, and in terms of like the writing for the character, this is probably the best it ever got.
Oh yeah.
This is like the perfect balance, along with Unleashed. Unleashed had kind of a similar thing going, in that it knows where it is, it knows the premise of the story is a bit silly, and it knows that like you are just working with your characters, but it plays it straight enough that, you know, you can enjoy the characterization and they're likable, but not enough that it gets too serious, too silly, like some of the mid-2000s games did. It's like the perfect middle ground for me.
Yeah, for sure.
It also helps that this game, again, as well as Unleashed, are arguably the 4Kids cast at their best.
Yes.
At least in terms of the Sonic series.
The voice acting in the game is pretty top-notch as well, but again, you'll always have people who are like, oh, at least in terms of Sonic and whatnot, but whatever, we're not here to talk about them. Can you tell me a little bit about Nemu, Richie, the Lady of the Lake?
Yes, so, the Lady of the Lake is seen as being a pivotal role in many of the stories because she gives Arthur his sword Excalibur, she enchants Merlin, and also she sort of raises Lancelot after the death of his father. It's a little bit confusing because there are apparently two separate sorceresses bearing the name the Lady of the Lake in some versions and adaptations of the Arthurian lore, and including in Le Morte d'Arthur. So you have, just two versions. It's very odd, but I think the key thing is that she is the one who gives him Excalibur. She's the sort of sorceress in the lake. But she's had sort of many different names over the years. There's Nimue, there's Nimue, she's been called Vivian, and just all sorts of various things. It's very confusing.
Also, Rosie the Rascal, that was one of them, well documented.
Princess Sally in one of the mistranslated booklets, yeah, it's all there.
Also, might as well get this in while we're here. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. You can't expect to wield supreme power just because some watery tart threw a sword at you.
Okay. You may dub in applause after the fact. No, I don't.
You don't know what that's from, do you, Flame?
No, I don't.
Fucking Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you uncultured swine.
Yeah, well, I barely watched anything, you know this.
I like how you were just honest there, to say like you weren't around at the time it came out or something. I appreciate that.
Oh, like, it's just one of the things that anyone who knows me knows that my knowledge of pop culture basically starts and ends with video games. I'm really that uncultured with everything.
Wow, that's depressing. Really, this is still Deep Woods, right? This is a different area.
Yeah, like, this is one of the different, like, there's a few different kinds of missions that we see throughout the game. There's obviously the just go to the goal ones, then there's this which is defeat 50 enemies, and usually this is the kind of mission in a game that I would just see as like boring filler, except the sword combat here when you get these clusters of enemies is so fun that I am perfectly okay with it.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Apart from when like you run up against one with a shield, you bounce off and then everyone just like dog piles on you and whatnot.
That is annoying, but the trick there is to use the Soul Surge when you see them with shields, because then you can just swing past them. And I will say I am being very careful at this point in the game. I will give up trying to no-hit run everything shortly, so get ready for that.
I'm gonna be honest, I stopped doing no-hit runs a few years ago because it wasn't doing wonders for my mental health, and fuck it, we don't get enough viewers for me to care about doing that well in games, so I don't give a shit.
Well, like, I usually like to, but I do also realise that when you use motion controls, it's kind of a losing game.
Well, if you want me to give a serious answer, eventually I realised I wasn't doing this for anyone but myself, and I didn't love myself enough to give a shit about my own mental and physical health, you know, so that's why I had to drop it. But you're doing pretty well so far, like no complaints on the gameplay side of things.
Yeah, I do manage to no-hit run every one of the bosses at least, so there's that.
Yeah, that's satisfying.
Yeah, that is good.
They actually learned from Secret Rings and actually put them all like on the same screen instead of da 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 da, and then you get another one and another one and another one.
Although then you get to Forces and it's back to the listing off the clothing items you unlock one at a time until you spend like an entire minute straight just mashing through all the things as they pop up. That's fun.
Wow, Forces not learning from games' mistakes in the past. What a surprise.
Yeah.
It says it all, really, doesn't it?
Now, this is one of the weaker kinds of missions in the fact that it is just a bit dull. What you're supposed to do is you collect rings, then complete these little quick time events to pass over those rings to the villagers. It is a waste of time, but there are certain missions where you have to do it for some reason. What they're going for in terms of theming is like the idea of, you know, being chivalrous and giving to those who need it and stuff like that, but it just doesn't translate well to gameplay.
Do we have like the full tenets of what it means to be a knight, Richie? Do you have that on hand?
Give me a second.
Okay.
Richie is looking up how to be chivalrous.
Right, so the Chivalric Code. Basically, the code of conduct developed between 1170 and 1220, but was never decided on or summarised in a single document, and mostly associated with the institution of knighthoods. And it was obviously a very important thing in medieval literature in general. So the Ten Commandments of Chivalry, which were ultimately set out in the 19th century, hundreds of years after the time of medieval chivalry, were, number 1, thou shalt believe all that the church teaches, and thou shalt observe all its directions. Thou shalt defend the church, thou shalt respect all weaknesses, and shalt constitute thyself the defender of them. Thou shalt love the country in which thou wast born. Thou shalt not recoil before thine enemy. Thou shalt make war against the infidel, without cessation and without mercy. Thou shalt perform scrupulously thy feudal duties, if they be not contrary to the laws of God. Thou shalt never lie, and shalt remain faithful to thy pledged word. Thou shalt be generous, and give largesse to everyone.
There you go, that's what the last mission was about, yeah.
Yes. Thou shalt be everywhere and always the champion of the right and the good against injustice and evil. But obviously in that there's no reference to, you know, women, horses, quests, or travel, despite the fact that you're looking at sort of most chivalric stuff in medieval literature, and you're looking at knights going on quests, defending the honour of women, or rescuing damsels in distress. That's basically what they did. And I mean, particularly Gawain, because he was basically a massive lady killer.
Well, we can talk more about that when we actually get to Blaze's function in the game, but honestly, that's a decent, like, characterization for her, I'm not gonna lie.
Also, Blaze is Percival, Gawain's Knuckles.
Fuckles. Damn it. Well, I'm sticking by what I said, okay?
Well, we all know that Knuckles is a ladies' man, right?
Well, what can I say? Bitches love Lego, you know?
He can look after 4 of them at once, there we go.
Whatever. Alright, don't attack the villagers, you will get marked down. Then were you kicking yourself when you accidentally attacked a villager at the end of the last mission, Flame?
No, I actually really do not care about that at all. So yeah, I am a terrible knight, but You know, sometimes when you've got a cluster of enemies and there's one of them standing right next to them, what the fuck do they expect? Like, come on, I can only be so chivalrous.
Again, this just goes back to, you know, them not having precise enough swordplay for this to matter. And when I imagine if you could go into, like, first-person mode and do little jabs and whatnot.
I don't want to play Sonic in first person, like, ever.
Agreed.
Oh, God, man.
And also, I think that brings up a good point about sort of the complexity of the swordplay, because I think that had they gone that level of complex, you would have completely lost any sense of speed with the gameplay, and I think that is sort of ultimately the challenge that they had and were always going to have with creating a more combat-heavy platform style that's more in the typical vein of Sonic, i.e. not the Werehog, but something that's more a typical Sonic level with more combat. And while it is not perfect, I think that this is sort of probably the best middle ground they were going to get in terms of keeping up the speed that people expect of Sonic, while still adding in something that equates to a bit more combat.
You know what, I agree. Like, I can see it in the gameplay. Like, I can see what they're actually going for, which surprisingly is a huge compliment to the Sonic team of that particular era, because this is, for lack of a better word, this was a gamble back in the day. Like, we give Sonic team shit for basically, you know, picking a topic at random off like a dartboard or something and then just rolling with it, but this has a lot more like charm and presence to it than Forces ever will.
Oh god, yeah.
Well, I think the issue there is that this, well, not really an issue, but like this game is ambitious, which newer games don't tend to be. And like, I know one of the complaints that we've had about a lot of recent Sonic games is that they're very short like this, but this is just, it's picked a theme and it's really went into it. It's not just a tick the box kind of 3-hour game like Sonic Forces was.
Oh man, I'm sorry, but I've kind of grown bored of like the colours formula. Colours, Generations, I'm trying to think of like one more. Maybe Generations 3DS. That was enough for me. Like, I'm not asking for a 15-hour game. That's not needed for, you know, Sonic. And I don't think we'll like ever have a Sonic game of that length, nor have we had one. But something of like SA1's length, I think, would be perfect. It doesn't even need to be Unleashed like level of depth, you know?
Well, see, I'm kind of okay with the Generations kind of format. It's just that when they've tried to redo that with Forces, it felt like they gimped it a little bit, rather than just being like doubling down on Forces and developing it more.
Well, it's like, you know, some of the side missions in Generations were actually, you know, fun, whereas I didn't ever want to spend more time in the side stuff in Forces than I could have, you know, stood to. I didn't mind the main campaign, as you may have seen in the playthrough, but otherwise I just wanted to be one and done, and when the game was done, I had no reason to do the side stuff whatsoever, unlike in Generations.
Agreed.
Yeah, it doesn't really motivate you to at all.
Well, I hope you've learned a lot in this part, guys. We had a ton of Arthurian lore. We learned that an ambitious but janky Sonic will always be more endearing than a bland and serviceable one, I suppose, and that Sonic is a hero. He may not follow the chivalric code to the letter, but he has a gigantic letter opener and doesn't afraid of anything. And that, in the end, is what matters. We'll see you next time for more of Sonic and the Black Knight. See you then.